I mentioned in your intro a specific phrase that has great weight with me from a personal hero of mine, Buckminster Fuller, and his coining of the term ephemeralization, which is, quote, the ability of technological advancement to do, quote, more and more with less and less until eventually you can do everything with nothing. Can you speak a little bit more on that concept and then how you kind of came around to starting Forte Labs?
Yeah, that's an important concept. I think it's, I work in this kind of intersection of tech, productivity, future of work, all these things. But one of my biggest influences has been manufacturing, like traditional manufacturing. I never worked in it, don't really have any real world experience in manufacturing itself, but there is this idea called the theory of constraints that was invented by this Israeli physicist in the 50s or 60s that went on to profoundly influence how factories are run, how manufacturing is done. And there are so many principles in manufacturing that apply directly to even the most advanced modern knowledge work. But you talk to most knowledge workers, people who work on computers all day, and they think, oh, manufacturing, that's the past, that's obsolete, that's dead. And it creates this blind spot where we don't learn from the past. We don't learn from the centuries of industrialization and the really powerful principles that were discovered. So the connection to that is, I think, you say the word efficiency and people kind of poo-poo it, like, efficiency, that's for the factory, that's for, the old style. But there's something about efficiency which is not just doing things faster. That's what people think, just like widgets, which is doing more with less. That's when you have a highly efficient process, you don't have all this, like going back to Toyota, they have low waste or zero waste. That's an efficient process. That's not discarding all this stuff. And if you get that principle and apply it to modern work, and it's leverage. That's also what leverage is doing a lot with a little. So there's this thread of like efficiency, leverage, doing more with less that goes back hundreds of years. And this connects back to, we talked about history. I learned so much from history that I feel like if people read more history, they wouldn't have to learn everything, reinvent the wheel and learn everything from scratch.
And we're going to get into that with your second brain a little bit later, because that's exactly one of your principles, is like starting over from scratch again. And that just is such a time waste, resource waste, everything.
Yes.
And that is the most non-efficient thing or inefficient thing that you could do.
Totally.
So in that way, so what are some of those, I guess, principles? Because nowadays, like for me in manufacturing, I think of additive manufacturing and 3D printing, because then, like you just said, is that, well, it's almost baked into the system or architecture that, like, hey, this is only just this particular prototype at this particular time, and that we will always be adding a little bit, but then that takes in that historical context that you were just saying. We have all of the other prototypes before then, and you can see the trajectory of where it was, where the design, what changed, and stuff like that. So, I mean, when it's changed, how can you update, I guess you could say, other than not getting too much, but like update our concept of industrialization and those principles that, like, maybe like you said, are a little poo-pooed or blind spotted now?
There's a lot of ways. I mean, really, my work with building a second brain is about ideas, and really thinking. It sounds very funny, but to think of your life, your work, your brain as a pipeline of ideas, like a factory. It feels day to day very mysterious and creative and all these things, but you can conceive of your work as just ideas come in from somewhere. From podcasts, from videos, interviews, from books you read, articles, conferences, seminars, classes, whatever, has to come in somewhere, right? Then there's some sort of processing you do. You summarize it, you curate it, you categorize it, you turn it into some other form, you split it up into pieces and distribute it. Knowledge workers, it's funny, that's, if you really observe a knowledge worker, all they're doing is getting ideas, processing them in some way, and then there's an output. There's some sort of, you're emailing it, you're publishing it, you're uploading it. And if you look at that process and just decide, and this was the great breakthrough of Toyota. Up until Toyota, the assumption was you can do a lot of something or you can do it well. That was the fundamental trade-off. Right. You were this, big factory or you were a craftsman, and there was nothing in between, right? And Toyota came along and said, no, you can achieve quality through quantity.
Right.
You can produce so many that the little defects and the little errors and mistakes naturally rise to the surface, and then you fix those,
Sure.
and then you spin up production again, and quality and quantity, rather than being trade-offs, become one and the same.
Right.
And I believe the very same thing is possible with knowledge workers. If you look at knowledge workers, it's not the case. Just look out in the world that there's people making a lot of work. Let's just talk about creative work,
Sure.
right? Or people doing the best. The people doing the best are also doing the most.
Right.
Look at people on social media. Do you ever wonder, like, how does this person comes out with a new, whatever it is, book, conference, class, video, blog post, just at a breakneck pace? It's because they've discovered this phenomenon of using quantity as a path to quality.
Yeah, and what is it, the Perotti principle, that like 80% of the work is done by 20% of the people in like an organization?
I think that's one reason why.
But then also yourself, it's like you can kind of do that as well.
Yeah.
Okay, and then so your big thing, if you said this in your 10 principles of building a second brain. If I had to give everyone one piece of advice for improving their productivity and learning, it would be principles over prescription. So let's go the most broad sense of why do I need a second brain? Because what you were just talking about, knowledge work, ideas come in, they get contextualized of some sort, and then you have an output. Well, you're just talking about a brain. You know, you're talking about literally synthesizing information or something to do. So why do I need a second one? You know, why do I need a second one if I'm already doing this?
Yeah. So most people aren't doing that. That's the first thing.
Good.
They're sort of coming into work from this hour to this hour and sort of just reacting to things. You know, they have a meeting and someone says, oh, here's the next action. They go do that. Then they have a phone call. Someone says that. It's sort of reactive, like bowling balls hitting each other.
Sure.
They're not systematic about it. If they need a piece of information right now, they go and find that piece of information. If, you know, they're not really thinking of their work as accumulating knowledge assets and then putting those assets to use again and again. There's a great parallel to money. You know, if you're living hand to mouth, you need $1 now, you go get $1. It's like very on demand.
Scarcity mindset.
Scarcity mindset.
Yeah.
Whereas the abundance mindset is you get your money and you invest it in assets that then do work for you. They produce income for you.
Totally.
It's a much more long-term, strategic, intentional way of thinking that I think people clearly understand this. With money, with productivity, it's less clear.
Right. And then but you also said every tip and tactic has a shelf life and will someday become outdated. Even the most cutting edge new app will eventually lose relevance, and we even see that in Fortune 500 companies. You know, those change after a decade or so like that. And then so with that, how do you bake things into the system? Because for me, my biggest proponent of baking things into the system architecture is Bitcoin. You know, in the blockchain, and that like at least the idea. I know we can get into other things and what you think about, but for me, just baking that into the system architecture, the trust or the need for productivity, efficiency in manufacturing, etc. If it's baked into the system and everyone gets it and utilizes it as such, but if it's not, then it's just this kind of, again, ad hoc, non-efficient kind of way. So how can you use that knowingly that this is going to become outdated, if you will?
I mean, my recommendation there is to focus on the system for generating insights rather than any particular insight. This comes back to the principles, not prescriptions. People want a quick fix always. They want to take a pill. They want to install a plugin. They want to use a certain kind of productivity app. Just do a one-time, one action that will just magically fix everything. That never works, of course, in any area. It may work very temporarily as a temporary fix, but you have to really be unattached from any particular hack or trick or tip or prescription. If you look at the kind of the advice industry, people in my industry, they'll often get on stage, for example, and say what they've learned. Right? Oh, I learned X, Y, Z. These are the 3 principles. These are the 3 steps, right?
Yes.
But it's like, that's the output of their system when actually their real secret is the system itself. The thing, the situation they've created that allows them to even reach such insights, not the insights themselves. Insights come and go, they come and go. And so that's why I really focus on the system. We have our 10 principles here, I have the takeaways, all that, but The reason I teach a course, let's say, and I'm working on a book, but I started with a course for building a second brain, is I need to lead people through the steps of setting things up. It's not an off-the-shelf thing, you just do what I do. It's a customization process, looking at what are the kinds of information you consume? How do you process those? Where do you publish them? And then working with them to kind of design their own second brain, which is what I call that system.